Hello, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. It is Week 8 ranks. I'm Chris Welsh. That's Pat Fitzmaurice. We got Mick Cialella, and we are talking quarterback and tight end ranks. We do not have the big positions, but guess what? Quarterbacks and tight ends are kind of difficult, especially tight ends. And we're going to be covering the top 12 and maybe some of the questions that are looming out there in the start and sit world for you guys. If you guys want more of the ranks, maybe you got Superflex, you're going into the top 24, or you just got to see, am I really doing this guy over this guy? Well, guess what? FantasyPros.com/rankings. You can check out all of our over 200 consensus expert ranks that are out there and what it ends up looking like. Over the week, those things continue to change all the way up until kickoff. So make sure you've got that bookmarked. Keep checking it out. And then we've got plenty of other offerings to hopefully help with your questions. Gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. Quarterback ranks. We're looking at the big board of our top 12 QBs for the week. And it kicks off with Jalen Hurts. Interesting. When you throw like 14 passes, you get in at number 1. Hard to not put Lamar Jackson at 1, but he comes in at 2. Josh Allen, Jordan Love, and Joe Burrow is our top 5. Caleb Williams at 6. I mean, obviously we see Jaden Daniels be higher. I was just about to say that's the highest of rookie, but Caleb Williams, this is by a mile, his highest rank. Sam Darnold, Kyler Murray, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy at 10, Baker Mayfield, and Kirk Cousins. Let me just throw a really quick one at you, Pat. Caleb Williams, are you comfortable putting in the rookie over CJ Stroud? I mean, over Pat. I mean, there's one glaring thing that wasn't mentioned on this. No Patrick Mahomes, like, are you actually comfortable Caleb Williams as your QB1 in a single quarterback league this week?
I'm a little behind consensus on Caleb. I've got him at QB8. I am starting him in either 1 or 2 leagues this week, but I do have CJ Stroud ranked higher. And, I don't know if we want to get into the Stroud ranking, but
sure, jump into it.
Terrible week last week, 10 for 21 against the Packers, under 100 passing yards. The Texans' offensive line just couldn't protect him. Like the Packers sacked him 4 times, pressured him all game long. But there is a better matchup for Stroud this week at home against the Colts defense that has allowed the 10th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and has recorded only 14 sacks in 7 games. So I think this is a much softer matchup for Stroud. I think we're getting a bounce-back game from him this week.
So this is really interesting, too. I kind of like this dynamic of Stroud versus Caleb Williams in here. I'm on like 2 different sides of this because I do love CJ Stroud. Every single week I see CJ Stroud's rank, and I'm like, it just seems too low, and I want to go higher. But I'm not even sure it's arguable right now. He just looks different without Nico Collins. This offense just works differently without Collins. Even if he's like, I got to get Tank Dell more involved. Great. Like, we got to be more efficient. But they've got Joe Mixon in there. So let's turn that question same side of this to you, Mick, because I know you are quite a bit lower on CJ Stroud. So you are probably firmly Caleb Williams over CJ Stroud this week.
I am Caleb Williams over CJ Stroud. It seems a little squirrely, given Stroud's pedigree, and also, he has great home splits historically. But again, I think the Nico Collins injury is an issue. And even before Collins got hurt, Stroud has only had 1 top 12 performance in the last 6 weeks. So I just think that, in general, the matchup is good against the Colts. But, I'm looking at the board and, do I want to start him over Williams or Kyler Murray or Kirk Cousins? I just can't really get there with Stroud this week.
And that number, by the way, you have Stroud at 15. What's the number you have on Caleb this week?
I have him at 10, but I also rate Jaden Daniels. So, for these purposes, it's probably more like Caleb at 9 and Stroud at 14.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point because Jaden is going to show. He didn't show up on this one, but there's always the possibility that's going to happen. Another one. These are always fun. This is where you guys are kind of on the different coins here. As a non QB1, because you can argue that these are the no brainers. The bigger questions are going to be if you have. If you stacked Caleb and Brock Purdy, that might be a decision maker. Or if you picked up Sam Darnold when you had Kyler Murray, those are some actual good quarterback questions this week. But for the most part, you're going to start your studs. One of those where you guys are quite a bit different is Jared Goff, who comes in around QB 14 on the list. Mick, you're about at consensus. You're a little bit lower, to be honest. You got Caleb higher and CJ Stroud higher. But Pat, where are you at on Jared Goff? Because it looks like it's a top 8 QB for you this week.
Yeah, I've actually dropped him one spot to QB9 on the news that Jameson Williams is going to be suspended for the next 2 games. I do still think Goff is a very good play in fantasy this week. He's averaging 9.3 yards per pass attempt, which leads the league. He's been hyper efficient as a passer this season. The only issue with Goff is passing volume. He's only averaging 29 pass attempts per game because the Lions do love to run the ball. They're very good at it, and they will lean into that running game if they've got a lead. And maybe the Lions are going to have a lead against an overmatched Titans team at home this week. But hey, I mean, we know all about the Jared Goff home road splits. He's at home this week. And like this Titans pass defense, like they're a little banged up. I don't know what the status is of L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie right now, but they've been missing both of those guys in the defensive backfield. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about Jared Goff this week, even though I'm uncomfortably above consensus on him in the rankings.
Can he get Sam LaPorta involved? Like, please, can we get like 3 targets from Sam LaPorta? I feel like that would really help the value.
Yeah, the Jameson Williams suspension might bode well for that.
And we'll talk about then. Mick, same thing. So you're a little bit lower on Jared Goff. He doesn't come in as a QB1 for you this week. Do you think the Jameson Williams thing and the lack of Sam LaPorta being involved and how much they like to run just, firmly takes him outside of really even having the upside of being a top 15 QB?
I can't say it firmly takes him in there because of how efficient he's been in the last few weeks. So I'm a little more nervous about fading him than I am about Stroud this week, to be honest, because Goff has been so hyper efficient. But I think the matchup with Tennessee, Tennessee has a very good run defense, but I don't think they're, in the class of Detroit when it comes to Detroit's offensive line and their 2 running backs. So I think Detroit's going to be able to run the ball against them. I think they're going to get ahead and then, take the air out of the ball a little bit. I do think Goff is going to be okay if you're, looking for a streamer, depending on who else is in your sort of rotation. But, I just don't know if the top 5 upside is going to be there for him this week.
Quarterback that's really always in everybody's mind and is in the start and sit. I really don't think it needs to be, but Anthony Richardson outside the top 20 in ECR, you guys actually have him a tiny bit higher. Mick, is there any optimism for like who is the guy? There's really not any optimism. Who's the guy that's below Anthony Richardson that makes you say, oh yeah, I will start Richardson above? Because I don't know what that name is unless it's like, Will Levis, who's not playing right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. I mean, right now I have him ranked over Trevor Lawrence and Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not even sure that is correct. And we've seen, Lawrence and Rodgers have not been anything special by any means this season. So yeah, I don't think there's a ton of reason for optimism with Richardson. It's one thing if he was running the ball a ton, and we've seen him have that ability. Obviously, he did get 14 carries last week, but even with that, he finished outside the top 20. I just think his limitations as a passer right now are being exposed, and it's making things very difficult from a fantasy perspective.
All right, this is going to be a nice gross one here, Pat, because I'm going to intertwine this next guy in here. If you're playing in a super flex, whoever your first quarterback is, let's say you had like Lamar Jackson, and you got that second quarterback. You have Anthony Richardson. Man, you felt really good. How did I get Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson? Then you have Bo Nix. Pat, you tell me, who is the quarterback that you put in as the second QB in your Superflex this week? Anthony Richardson or Bo Nix? Because I know the answer.
I have Bo Nix ranked in QB1 range this week at QB12, which hard to believe, but Bo Nix has 255 rushing yards, 3 touchdown runs this year. He has been the Konami code quarterback we were not expecting this year. In his last 2 games, Nix has 61 and 75 rushing yards. He's also thrown for 4 touchdown passes in his last 3 games, and he's up against the Carolina Panthers, who are almost as bad defending the pass as they are defending the run. So it's Bo Nix, but it's going back to your question about Anthony Richardson, like a couple of quarterbacks who I would start Richardson over. I'm starting him over Baker Mayfield without Baker's top 2 wide receivers.
Wow, and Baker, by the way, is 11 at ECR. Just want to throw that in. So that's a big one.
Which is wild to me. It's not as if Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are incidental to the success of the Tampa Bay passing game. They're a pretty big part of that success. So, man, I don't have Baker in the top 20 this week. And I would also play Anthony Richardson over Geno Smith who probably isn't going to have DK Metcalf and has a tough matchup against the Bills and has a one touchdown limit every week as far as his passing. So, yeah, I mean, Richardson's upside in the running game remains immense. And as bad as he has been as a passer, completing under 50% of his throws, he's averaging 7.8 yards per attempt. So there are some big plays there, like 7.8 yards per attempt. Also the average per attempt of Joe Burrow and Josh Allen this year. So are some big plays in the passing game on occasion. And we know just that weekly rushing upside for Anthony Richardson can be sky high. You never know if you're going to have the week where he runs for 2 touchdowns.
There's your big play for the week. QB1, Bo Nix. Wild. Forced to go rogue. Hunted from within. This is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Developed by Treyarch and Raven, Black Ops 6 is a mind-bending narrative and unbound by the rules of engagement. This is signature Black Ops. Dynamic moment-to-moment gameplay, including a variety of play spaces with blockbuster set pieces, action-packed moments, high-stakes heists, and cloak and dagger spy activity. Best-in-class multiplayer experience will test your skills across 16 new maps at launch, including 12 core 6v6 maps and 4 strike maps that can be played 2v2 or 6v6, marking the epic return of round-based zombies. The fan-favorite mode where players will take down hordes of the undead in 2 brand new maps at launch. You can look forward to even more exciting maps and groundbreaking experiences in both multiplayer and zombies. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is a spy action thriller set in the 90s by the end of the Cold War and the rise of the United States as a single superpower. Head over to callofduty.com/Black Ops 6 and pre-order Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Available on October 25th.
Rated M for mature.
Gentlemen, let's go talk about tight ends moving off of quarterbacks. Again, there's lots of ways if you guys have got those questions on the live streams for your streaming or which quarterback to play. If you have those answers, we can get you covered. But same thing is going to happen on tight end. There's tons of big questions. As a matter of fact, the number 1 tight end for this week is questionable. That is George Kittle going up against the Dallas Cowboys. He is coming in at number 1. Brock Bowers is 2. That is probably, just going to throw this out here, barring injury, probably your top 2 tight ends the rest of the season, I would imagine. Kelsey, who comes in at 3, obviously that could change if we start seeing the target, but it hasn't happened yet if the target share starts going. Kelsey comes in at 3, Trey McBride at 4, David Njoku at 5. There's your top 5. Evan Ingram, Tucker Kraft, Jake Ferguson, Kyle Pitts, Sam LaPorta, Cade Otton, and Cole Kmet. I would actually like to start with Sam LaPorta then for a second, just as like a add back in here. Pat, he comes in at 10. You're high on Jared Goff. What does that mean for you then for where you're putting Sam LaPorta? I would imagine you got to have Sam LaPorta higher if Jared Goff is like top 10 QB for you this week.
I had LaPorta 11. I'm moving him up to 10 with the news of the Jameson Williams suspension. I want to believe, I'm just wondering if Sam LaPorta is completely healthy with his inability to draw targets versus last year. And I know the Lions have been a little run heavier this year, but like we're also seeing Tim Patrick and Khalif Raymond get involved in the passing game. And I worry that the absence of Jameson Williams does not necessarily mean a substantial target uptick for Sam LaPorta. Maybe I'd like to think that, but until we see it happen, he hasn't been involved enough for me to comfortably rank him as like a top 7 or 8 tight end.
Nick, it's been bad. It's just not been great with Sam LaPorta. But then you do get this like change in Jameson Williams going out. What is your optimism on Sam LaPorta being able to, I don't know, get back to value? I mean, he is comfortably being talked about as one of like the top 3 biggest busts in fantasy so far this year.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, he has 3 combined targets over the last 2 weeks. So it's not pretty right now. I think, the absence of Williams, it shouldn't hurt. You mentioned it could go to Raymond or Patrick, but I think LaPorta's got to be in the mix. And, I just think you have to trust the pedigree that he displayed last year, and hopefully he can get back to, at least some of that. I mean, I think you mentioned before that, Bowers and Kittle are going to be the top 2 going forward. I mean, Bowers is running circles around LaPorta as far as, target distribution and that sort of thing. So, but I think, given the lack of quality tight ends, or at least consistent tight ends, I do think you have to put LaPorta in the mix as like a low end tight end one.
So this one's kind of interesting because I actually thought in the LaPorta conversation, this guy might be ahead of Sam LaPorta. And I think there's some ways people might put it, but Cade Otton. So you guys talked about the Buck situation, specifically you, Pat. You talked about there's no wide receivers. Well, Baker seems to love Cade Otton right now. And Cade Otton was getting littered with targets. Now that those wide receivers are gone, he seems even more like the safety net. I kind of thought we might even see it in the ranks that Otton would move above Sam LaPorta. He is 11 to LaPorta's 10, but both of you guys have got him at 12. So you've got Otton as your final quarterback or final tight end, but you've got LaPorta above him in both sides. So Pat, I'm just curious, do you think Otton has the potential to overpass Sam LaPorta specifically this week?
He does because of the targets. Like LaPorta not getting targets, and Cade Otton since week 3 has averaged 7.4 targets and 5.2 catches a game. And that was with Godwin and Evans basically healthy up until, they lost Evans in the second quarter of this past game, and Godwin in the final minute. So you would think that he would have to be even more heavily involved, or at least as heavily involved without those wide receivers. So right now I've got him at 12, and I'm thinking seriously about moving him past maybe not only LaPorta, but also Dalton Kincaid. And getting him up to like tight end 10.
See, I'm glad you said that because that was about what I was going to ask and say, well, then why isn't Otton? What would it take? So Mick, that's kind of the thing. What is it going to take? Because this seems like volume versus ceiling. LaPorta is the ceiling. We know what that can be. It just has not been this year versus like, tell me the scenario where Otton doesn't get 8 targets in this game minimum. And that is probably that's Jalen Hurts-esque 14 pass attempts or whatever. So what is it going to take for you to make that change of Otton over Sam LaPorta specifically for this week? Or maybe it doesn't happen.
It probably won't take much. I'm in complete agreement with Pat. I'm looking at these rankings and thinking that Otton is definitely going to get a bump up. The question is, exactly as he mentioned it, do you put him above the LaPortas and Kincaids of the world? I think in most instances you probably do. I mean, I don't think either one of those guys, specifically LaPorta or Otton, has a great matchup. Tennessee and Atlanta are both top 10 in DVOA versus tight ends. But I do think that Detroit has so many other options, even without Williams in the fold, as compared to Tampa Bay. So I think Tampa Bay, you're going to look at Baker Mayfield throwing a ton to his running backs and Otton at the tight end position. So I think Otton is certainly viable as a top 10 guy this week.
All right, final tight end question, TJ Hockenson. Yes, TJ Hockenson. People are still trying to adjust in ranks and everything like that. Pat, you've got him at 22. Mick, you've got him at 18. Mick, let's start with you. What is your anticipation of what we're going to see out of Hockenson? Clearly, you guys are not saying that he is a starter at this point. I would guess a lot of that is because of we're just not really sure what the snaps are going to look like or anything. But what is your Hockenson take for week 8?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. If we knew for sure that he was getting a full workload, he'd probably be in the top 12 for me in this matchup. The Rams have the worst DVOA when it comes to tight ends. We saw Brock Bowers go ballistic against them last week. We've seen other tight ends destroy the Rams. So the volume is the only thing that's prohibiting me from putting him inside the top 12, even off of a long layoff. I think Hawkins has got a really good matchup. We know that Minnesota loves to throw to the tight ends historically over the years with Hockenson. So I think that, if I knew the volume was there, I'd bump him up a little bit higher. But I do think, would not surprise me at all to see him, catch 4 or 5 passes and a touchdown on Thursday night.
Pat, do you think the best play is just to say that's great that he's active, sit him on your bench so we get a really good look at what this first week is, and don't worry and don't try to get him in there? Maybe unless it's him or Juwan Johnson or something like that. But obviously the Komets and the Ottons and stuff, those are guys that have bumped up in tight ends here. You think we just need to sit him for this week and see what we're going to get?
I think so, Welsh. That's a pretty good way to frame it, especially in a week where there are no teams on bye. I think most people can probably afford to be patient, and Juwan Johnson probably is sort of the break point for me, where if it's TJ Hockenson versus Juwan Johnson tied to Spencer Rattler, I'm probably going with Hawk. But I mean, Hockenson was only limited in practice as of Tuesday, so I don't even think it's a total slam dunk that he plays this week. And if he does, it's probably going to be on some sort of snap counts. But as Mick pointed out, the matchup is really good. And maybe even on just 12 to 20 snaps, Hockenson might be able to put up 10 fantasy points against this Rams defense.
Some of the best help we can give you guys is if you have not done it, it is not too late. Download the My Playbook app or go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook. Sync your league and you can get customized help for your league. You guys always have very specific questions. And what do fantasy analysts say sometimes? Which team look like? What's the format? Who else is available? Well, guess what? When you sync your league, those questions are literally answered and you'll start getting customized advice to the players available on the wire, what your team looks like, trades that you can do, the trade analyzer, waiver assistant, a gajillion things more. Go and check it out today. Download the app at your app store, My Playbook, or go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook. That is going to do it for the ranks for week 8 for Pat and Mick. I'm Welsh. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and we will talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros.